Hello, and welcome to another season of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And I want to fact check this, but I'm 99% sure this is the beginning of our 50th season. This will be, which is a little tricky math-wise, because I'm like, that doesn't mean it's the 50th book we covered. Because that month covered 4 books, but was 1 season.
Same with social media, and then we've had
so it doesn't really mean anything other than hey, it's a round number, which means we're going to sell 27 variants, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. You got to have and you got to have the blank one, the foil one, typically are. But yeah, it really does depend on what our numbering actually is. Like, what do we do for the one shots and some of the specials and we've had. I
think our numbering is as clear as any comic continuity out there. You can go pound for pound with
it. Really is. Sometime next year will just be Storied Arcs 1000 because that's what you're allowed to do.
I mean, you get bored. You're like, we have all these cool covers. Yeah,
and then we jump and then we jump back into regular numbering. It's totally fine. But yeah, no, So is this the 50th quote unquote season, or maybe? But we are.
All I know is I was entering the Matthew Roberts interview, and that was episode 6 of season 49. So presumably this will be season 50, but we may jump to 1,000 because I don't even know if anyone can see that. I think maybe some podcast apps show you like season and number, and others just show you like chronologically, this is when they came out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the show and I don't care about that. I don't pay attention to the numbering. So
yeah, I was curious if
it's all just sequential to me.
Because I don't think it's visible. Well, then again, I don't listen to our podcast. So
maybe on certain podcasts after this, I don't know.
It's something not worth celebrating, but I thought worth noting, and we've spent the appropriate amount of time on it. So now let's talk about Skyward and its creative team. I'm happy to go synopsis first or creators. Dealer's choice here.
Let's talk a little about Skyward. Skyward's book from Image Comics. So many of the book cover are. It's a 15-issue series that's a little more than a maxi series, but 15 issues is like a solid run. Not like the longest ongoing. But issue 1 came out April 2018, ran through July 2019. So it's a pre-COVID kind of era book. It's broken down into 3 volumes, which is how we're going to discuss it. Each volume is 5 issues. It's very fun, as Mike and I like to talk about when the story arcs have names. Volume 1 is called My Low G Life. Volume 2, Here There Be Dragonflies, and Volume 3, Fix the World. And there is, which I actually wasn't aware of, because I read this book when it first came out and have the trades. But in March of 2021, there was a hardcover collection that came out. Now there is no paperback like compendium as of yet, and I don't see one on the schedule. I'm not saying they won't come back to it.
I don't want to get into the wordsmithing of it, but
hardcover collection.
I think they would call it the complete trade paperback. I'm not sure it's big enough to warrant.
They would call it the
compendium.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the cutoff is there. It's one of those things like. Yeah.
Generally, a compendium ends up being paperback. That's just kind of like an omnibus.
Yes. Compendium. I think compendium is always hardcover. Paperback. So yeah,
I pretty much think so. Yeah. But it would be like the complete, Skyward or something like that. But let's say that, as far as I know right now, it doesn't exist. But there is a full, complete collection. It is out in hardcover, and then that's a few years old. So that's another way to read it as well. So if you were to pick that up to read along with us, just stop every 5 issues, because that's how we're going to breaking it down.
Yeah. Shall I read the synopsis for Volume 1, which
let's go.
Relatively spoiler free, although I think there might be an own goal in here.
Maybe.
But we'll discuss. One day, gravity on Earth suddenly becomes a fraction of what it is now. 20 years later, humanity has adapted to its new low gravity reality. And Willa Fowler, who was born just after G-Day, and to Willa Fowler, who was born just after G-Day, it's pretty awesome. You can fly through the air. I mean, sure. You can also die if you jump too high. So you just don't jump too high. And maybe you don't get mixed up in your dad's secret plan to bring back gravity that could get you killed. from writer Joe Henderson, showrunner, yada, yada, yada. We'll talk about the team in a minute. My first question is like literally in the first 3 pages, the baby already exists and then gravity breaks, meaning she is not born after G-Day. She is born just before G-Day.
Well, yeah, I guess.
It says she's
maybe.
born just after G-Day. That's just patently false, unless there's some retcon in the timeline coming in the story. But anyway, I just thought that was like, wow, how did that slip past the goalie? But it's the same impact of she has never known the world with gravity or with its normal gravity. Like that's all that really matters. I just thought that was like a very strange, like, whoops, something got lost in translation. And I will say, you can tell there's like a little fourth wall sense of humor in the description there. That's not in the book, although the book is lighthearted and fun. And it's one of those where like, you have to, like a good, like, I don't know, CW show or something, you embrace the premise. You say, oh, this is fun. This is the sandbox we're going to play in. If you start going hard sci-fi on it, you're not going to have a lot of fun. And like the first splash page that happens is stuff flying in the air, but it's not nearly enough stuff. Like some people are flying, some people aren't. Some cars are up in the air, some aren't.
But it would depend, though, because objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. So just because you lose gravity doesn't, if you were in motion, if you were walking as you lost gravity, you have some level of momentum and forward motion. You would then push off the ground. If you were lying in bed, presumably you wouldn't. But yeah, no, I think with the
there's
book
a lady
like this,
walking her dog, but that's still on the ground while everyone else is in the air. But it's a great splash pit because she's looking up like, what? So it's like, just let it happen.
Well, that's what I was going to say. With a book like this, when you get lost in science, this book isn't concerned with the hard science. That is not what this book is about. It is about the premise as kind of the macro view of and there are very serious things. There is loss. There is trouble and ordeals to kind of work through. Even in that description there, right? The idea of just by hinting at volume 3, calling fix the world implies that the world is broken, right? And not just through the reduction in gravity. It's the idea that because of that, the world is broken. So there are larger things to think about and at play, but yeah, it's not about the specifics. This is not a hard sci-fi book. And so there are some lighthearted and a little more dare I say, whimsical-esque moments. And I think that's a balance that they try to achieve in the book of understanding the stakes of the world and understanding that the characters in it treat it as real, but also the fact that it's been 20 years on. And so their approach to it is that it isn't novel then. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you approach, you understand the potential perils of living in a world like this. But if you've grown up with it, this is all you know. You also understand the things that you can do with it now. There are other things available to you. So there is a playfulness and a kind of a level of whimsy to this book, while also dealing with some of these larger kind of potentially larger thematic issues.
Yeah. Super fun. But yeah, I don't say that to discourage anyone. I just tell them like, this is how to set your expectations, like calibrate your radar for like amazing elevator pitch. Like that first line is like, what if the Earth's gravity doesn't disappear, it just reduces drastically. And then 20 years in, you have, how they refer to like Gen Z as digital natives. These are low G natives, and they are now like entering the workforce and coming of age. So it's just a phenomenal premise.
Yeah. And I think something about that too is that 20 years is effectively what we could like generation, 2/3 of a generation, right? Meaning that the vast majority of population on the world remembers the world as it was. Like 20 years isn't long enough. So that I think a time frame like that is is very intentional and specific to the story itself, in that there are people, the vast majority of people around would still remember the world as it was. So we're not talking like multiple generations of this is the world we've lived in and things like that. That is still within the very knowing, living memory of the world. And so again, I think those are the kinds of things that this book is playing with. It's not playing with the hard science of, well, how does if gravity went down, reduced, the following things would also happen, and they're not in the book. Like, don't come to this comic with that kind of nitpick, like that level of fine-tooth comb. Like that's not what we're here for, and that's totally fine. It's not what the book's about. There's,
in fact, if you want that, you are welcome to go check out Seven Eves by Neil Stevenson, which opens with the first sentence is, "The moon blew up and no one knows why." And that's what happens. It's like it messes with the earth, like the moon just imploded, and it's like a hard sci-fi book, but they never figure out why the moon blew up. It was just like, now that it's not there, we have to deal with all the realities. Yes, including all the incoming debris and things like that. So if you want hard sci-fi, go spend 80 hours reading that book. If you want a good time with a similar premise, pick up Skyward. Absolutely.
So we mentioned a little bit here. I think you may have mentioned his name. We'll talk about the creative team here. Writer Joe Henderson, artist Lee Garbett, colorist Antonia Fabela, and letterer Simon Bowland. Now, this is entirely unintentional, but this is now back-to-back books for us, Mike, where our writer is not primarily a comics writer. They are actually someone who works in television. The last book we just talked about was Manifest Destiny with writer Chris Dingus, who has worked a ton in the genre space, most notably the showrunner of Agent Carter as part of the extended MCU television series. Here with this book, our writer is Joe Henderson, who only has essentially 3 comics to his name, and they've all been drawn by Lee Garbett. So whatever thing he has going, he has with Lee. But he is mainly a TV writer and producer. He's got a bunch of credits, shows like Graceland, Almost Human, White Collar, which is a show that I really enjoyed, the Blue Skies era of USA. I was also producer on 11/23/63, the adaptation of the Stephen King novel about the Kennedy assassination. I don't know if you ever read that book and or saw that adaptation. I think it was on Hulu. I never saw the adaptation, but it was an interesting book. Most notably, he was the showrunner for the Lucifer television show, which was very, very, very loosely kind of sort of tangentially related to Sandman from DC Vertigo, the spinoff from the Sandman universe. There's a show that started at Fox for like 2 or 3 seasons and then got canceled and then got revived by Netflix and went for another like 3 seasons, which, it's one thing for a show to get revived by a streamer. It's another thing for that show to get revived and like actually thrive on that streamer. So I know Lucifer was a show that was pretty well beloved by its fan base. And like I said, it's only very loosely based on the Vertigo character that first appeared in Sandman. But that's his most notable kind of TV credit. We'll talk about his other 3 comic credits in a sec, but I did want to talk about some like rumored reported things that he's working on, and a couple of these are a few years old, so I don't know how active they are still. But he was attached to write the live action Pokemon TV series. That was first reported a handful of years ago. I don't know if there's going to be any news on that, but he was attached to that. Similarly, he was attached to be the screenwriter for a reboot of Flight of the Navigator. Are you familiar with Flight of the Navigator?
I am not.
I didn't think you were.
Is this our small generational gap showing itself again?
Or is this a movie that came out? Probably generational gap, because I think people of a certain late 70s, early 80s loved this movie. It was 1986, I think, 87 maybe. But he was attached as a screenwriter for this reboot to be, at least initially, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. This is, I think, reported. This is 3 or 4 years ago, at least when it was first announced. So I don't know how much that is still alive now. But Flight of the Navigator was, again, for children of a certain era, like my brother and I, was hit real big because it stars a kid. It's about a kid who goes missing for 8 years and he comes back and he hasn't aged a day, but his whole like everyone else in the world around him has aged, and you find out he's connected to like UFOs and things like that, and it big nostalgia stuff for kids in my generation.
Yeah, there are people in my generation who feign nostalgia for that. Like the people in my generation who were like, "Oh, Stranger Things reminds me of my childhood." I'm like, no, it might remind you of things you remember seeing on TV when you were a very, very small child, but they weren't actually the things coming out in the 90s.
Yeah, you had to have been 8 to 12 in the 80s, versus 3 to 5 in the 80s. Yeah. He is the thing that I know is active with Joe Henderson, because this news is only a handful of months old, is that he is attached to adapting or writing again or producing, I'm not quite sure which, but the Energon universe animated series. The Energon universe being the current Hasbro license over at Image Skybound, led by Robert Kirkman, which involves their Transformers and G.I. Joe and Void Rivals, soon to be Mask, and things like that. So all the Hasbro properties that Skybound got from IDW a few years ago, they're looking to do an adult animation series, and I know Joe Henderson has been attached to that, because that news is, as we record now, that news is only a handful of months old. He is also working on an adaptation, I believe a movie adaptation of Shadecraft. Shadecraft being the second comic book that Joe Henderson did with Lee Garbett. Skyward, we're doing now, being the first. Shadecraft, a 5 or 6 issue little miniseries, also at Image. Very, very cool book. They also have a third book which came out over on Distillery in the oversized magazine format, called The Big Burn. So, at time that Joe Henderson dips his toe back into comics, it appears he's always going with Lee Garbett as an artist, which I love and enjoy, because I didn't know who Joe Henderson was, but I picked up this book, Skyward, initially because I saw Lee Garbett's art and I was like, that looks dope. I love that. And I love Lee Garbett's style. So I had no idea who Joe Henderson was at the time, but now I know if he's writing a book, I'm probably going to pick it up, because that means Lee Garbett's going to be drawing it.
Yeah, I would say he's one of those artists that I didn't really recognize by name, but I liked his art, and then I pull him up on Comic Geeks, and it's like, oh, of course, I've got a bunch, at least like covers and stray things like that. But I know I've read Lee Garbett books.
So I think I've said this before, maybe going all the way back to like Ascender Descender, right? Where Dustin Wynn was an artist and it's like, oh, I like that guy's style, but I didn't know his name and I didn't pair his name with the style until that book.
Yeah.
This was that book for Lee Garbett where I saw this book. It's got a great cover of our main character, Willa. She's, she's upside down because she can float through the air. This big bushy hair behind her. It's fantastic. And I flipped through it and I was like, this looks great. I love this art. I know this art, I think. And then, yes, you look up Lee Garbett, like, oh, I have read a lot of stuff. And then at this point on, I'm able to pinpoint his name and his art. So this is the book that it wasn't the first book I read of him, like you said as well, but it was for me the first book where I put a name to the art style. And I said, okay, now I have season tickets to Lee Garbett now. When he writes a book, when he's on a book, I'm going to check it out. That's enough for me to check it out. And that started here with Skyward, because Lee has had a much longer career going back into kind of late 90s, early aughts. Lee Garbett he's a British artist, which means he worked on 2000 AD and Judge Dredd, like everyone else who worked in comics coming out of the UK. I think that's a must. He also has done numerous covers. He is someone that I think, like you said, you may not have a whole lot of interiors from him, but you probably got a lot of covers from him, whether you know it or not. And a lot of them are illuminating main series covers. A lot of them are variant covers. This
only reinforces exactly what we're saying. Today, I got an email that had solicits for the second printing of Daredevil #1 by Stephanie Phillips, and it was a Lee Garbett cover for the second printing. And I was like, where do I know that name? And it's like, you idiot, you're podcasting about him tonight. Like it was still that level on the radar. So, and this, to be clear, this is not a book that I have read prior to the podcast. Obviously you have, and have been a fan since 2018, 2019 of this creative team.
Like known fan. Yeah. Because he's done a bunch of stuff. I think his first stuff in the U.S. comic market, I believe, was over at DC mainly. He did some work on a book called The Highwayman. Worked kind of when DC and Wildstorm had a crossover, and did some work with some of the Wildstorm characters like Midnighter. Worked on The Outsiders. The one thing I remember. One thing looking back on that I didn't know was him at the time, but realizing afterwards, is that he did a little short 2-issue Batman story with Grant Morrison that bridged between Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis, which was a big moment in time, kind of that big moment, kind of right before the New 52. He had came in and just it was just kind of not an out of continuity, like out of timeline. It was like, here's what was happening while other things were going on. He worked on that. He also worked on Lucifer, the second volume of Lucifer. The original volume of Lucifer was done by Peter Carey and Mike Roach, the team behind the Unwritten book that you and I have talked about before. In 2015, they brought a Lucifer series back. And I do believe that Joe Henderson showrunned Lucifer. In terms of where it's loosely based off of, I do believe it may be off of that second Lucifer arc in 2015, I think, or it's similar to that. So that's possibly how they may have met and got working together. He just did a mini arc on Detective with Tom Taylor, but his most notable DC work probably is Batgirl in 2009, which introduced Stephanie Brown as Batgirl, as the fourth canonical Batgirl. Stephanie Brown, also the fourth canonical Robin, for what it's worth. The Bat family is very weird in terms of how many times people have been certain characters and how that all fits in a timeline, given the sliding time scale of comics. But this was a moment when introduced a new Batgirl. Stephanie Brown was a character that had existed. She was introduced as a character called Spoiler. Then she was the fourth Robin for a very, very, very short while until she got fired. Then she died or faked her death. They brought her back. She came back as Spoiler. Then she was this run of Batgirl that Lee Garbett drew, went back to being Spoiler, and then back to being a Batgirl now, under the Batgirls title, where her and Cassandra Cain and Barbara Gordon are all Batgirls together. It's very complicated. It's very weird. But anytime you introduce a new character or a new version of a character, I guess we'll say, it is notable. So that 2009 Batgirl run, with Stephanie Brown in the costume, was kind of a big deal. And that was a big deal for him at the time. And I think his probably most notable work over at DC. I think since then, he's done most of his stuff over at Marvel, including currently a couple of different runs and or miniseries. Loki, Agent of Asgard with Al Ewing, which that was some stuff that they pulled some of that stuff for some of the Loki TV series, that and like Vote Loki and things like that. The Death of Doctor Strange, relatively recently with Jed MacKay. A couple of arcs of Captain Marvel with Kelly Thompson, which is a really, really fun book. During the Fall of X, post Krakoan era of X-Men, he did a book with Cy Spear called Uncanny Spider-Man. It was a time when Nightcrawler was posing as Spider-Man. Don't put too much stock to it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Didn't make a whole lot of sense during the event, but it's a fun book because Nightcrawler rules. And you already mentioned it, but as we're recording this right now, he is currently the brand new ongoing artist for Daredevil with Stephanie Phillips. Just started, issue 1 is out as we're recording this. Issue 2 will be out very soon. But he will be the new ongoing on Daredevil, which is very, very cool. Him and Stephanie Phillips are pretty
not only very
team,
cool, yet another, like, at some day in the universe, they're going to have to give Matt Murdock a prize for having so many professions. In the last run, he was a Catholic priest running a boys' home. He's been mayor, he's been an attorney, and now he's a law professor. And the challenge would be like, hey, guess what? You get to draw Daredevil. It's like, wow, that's really exciting. What's he going to do? He'll be lecturing a class. So have fun. But it was great. It was like a really compelling scene in the classroom, which is not necessarily an easy gig.
Daredevil's a book. Daredevil's a book that you've actually probably read way more than I have. Daredevil's the weird character for me personally. I've read a ton of Daredevil in my life, but I don't think I've ever read more than like 20 issues of a run. But I've read 20 issues of every single run since the late 90s, like going back to the Marvel Knights days. You know, it's a character that I read. And it's like, oh yeah, new team, and Daredevil is one of those books that gets the big name creators. Everyone has got a Daredevil story, much like everyone's got a Spider-Man story or a Batman story. Like Daredevil is, if you are the solo Daredevil writer, you join a list of luminaries of comics history. Like that's no joke. But it's a character that I read, and then I get through it, and it's like, right, I'm
not a huge fan.
Daredevil. Yeah, like I'm reading this because I like the people making it, but it's like I am the biggest Daredevil fan. So why am I? And so I drop off, not because of anything to do with the book. It's just that new realization of like, right. For lack of a better thing, like I love the X-Men. I'm always gonna read the X-Men, but like Daredevil is a book, and like I don't know if I'll stick with it, and that's nothing to do with the book. At some point, I will hit a wall with the character and be like, right, this isn't a character that I have historically enjoyed much. But when there's a new team by two creators I absolutely love. I love Lee Garbett's art. We'll definitely get to that as we talk to this. And I'm a huge fan. I love Stephanie Phillips as a writer. Some of the books that she's done over at Marvel and her creator-owned stuff is fantastic. A lot of it's over at Boom. I absolutely love it. So I will definitely give this book a chance and continue reading it because, yeah, I think they're great. I think they're awesome. Yeah, that's the majority of what Lee Garbett has done as an artist. And I mentioned the two books his two main books in Image, which maybe are kind of his only creator-owned books in Image, are these two books with Joe Henderson, Skyward that we're talking about now, and Shadecraft, that was kind of their follow-up, a second book, along with Distillery, the big burn over at Distillery as well. But yeah, you've seen Lee Garbett's art around, and for the time being, you will see it in the pages of Daredevil.
Yeah. I don't know how to describe it other than I think it's got to be really fun to be his colorist because it's not a lack of detail, but he does give you like large chunks to color in the same way, and it's really easy on the eye.
And I think we'll probably talk about this when we get actually into the discussion of the book itself. I think one of the things I do like about his art, and it's an overused and trite phrase, but it's incredibly clean line work. I think like it's not busy. One of the things when you look back, especially coming out of the 80s and the 90s, how basic line work was, like how much hatching and cross hatching and how much shading, quote unquote, was done by the pencilist, versus simply letting an inker and or colorist work on that. I think Lee Garbett's line work is very clean. It's very efficient. And I think that allows him to draw some incredible facial expressions. I think he does incredible facial work, character work, which I absolutely love. And yeah, there are a lot of space to allow for color to fill in, and then you can have a lot of what am I thinking of, like changes in tone and quality and things like that on the page. So yeah, and it's probably why he works with Antonia Fabela, who is the colorist on this book. He works with him a ton. Fabela has done a ton of Marvel work, a little bit DC work, but a lot of the work he has done, Marvel, DC, has been Lee Garbett's stuff. He colored both Skyward and Shadecraft, his creator-owned books at Marvel. Fabela also colored Death Not Strange, Loki, Agent of Asgard, and his one of his runs on Captain Marvel over at Marvel a handful of years ago. And he colored the Lucifer Volume 2 series in 2015 that Lee Garbett did. So again, once you find a team, right, you find someone that you're comfortable working with, who just gets what you're trying to do on the page, I'm sure that sort of feeling is fantastic. And it can be hard probably to switch up. Completely unrelated. I read a story that came out of a convention a few months ago, or from maybe a month or so ago, from Greg Capullo, talking about how he is probably not going to do interiors much anymore because his art team, and Capullo is an old school guy, right? He draws by hand. He has an inker. He has a colorist. His art team is basically broken up because the guys he's worked with before are moving on and doing other things on his own. Like I think his colorist is off working on like as an artist himself. And he's saying like at his age and have his career, because the people he's worked with so many years, his team isn't as available. Doing ongoing interior work probably isn't in his future anymore. He'll still do covers because when he does a cover or something like that, Capullo mostly does the stuff on his own and has colorists he works with. But I can imagine when you have a routine set with the same people over and over again, there's that institutional history of, what I'm looking for here, and you can just get it done. And to try and build that relationship with someone else can be tough. And so, yeah, when I see someone like Antonia Fabela and I see his credits and I see how often they match up with Lee Garbett, that there's enough history there that I like how this guy does what he does on my work,
Yes.
I like, he can bring out the best in my work if I, and I know what to give him. He's going to elevate his work and elevate my work together on the page. And we want to keep working together and doing that. So anytime we see a team like that is always great.
Yeah. Love to see it. Happy for people who find that. And honestly, like I like Greg Capullo's art. I know at least one person listening who does not calling anyone out by name, but you know who you are. I imagine, being at his level, even still at his level, I guess I should say, the amount you get paid per page for a cover versus interior is like, it's way more cost effective to do covers.
Well, it's also probably time efficiency as well.
I mean, obviously that.
But for a guy like that who comes from an older school, the previous generation of artists out of the 90s who still works in that way, you're relying on that team there. It gets a little different now as we work in a little more digital age and you have artists working in different mediums. But yeah, it's nice to know. I always get comforted when I see an art team on a book, and when I look up their credits, I see they've worked together on multiple things, either multiple things before or multiple things after, because it shows that. Right.
Well, then you become a little bit of an archaeologist and you're like, well, let me find the first thing. Let me see if I can see the magic, exactly. Which I have thought several times about suggesting we do, just totally breaking format of the show in literally every way and doing the Lemire Sorrentino issues 17 to 34 Green Arrow, which I believe was their first encounter. Just
the new 52 era, right?
Yes. Which is a much maligned run. It was the only problem with it, in my opinion, as a Green Arrow reader, is that it was just all over the place because the creative team was switching up so much. I think they had the longest stint out of the 52 issues there,
and I think they were second, right? The first one went.
Oh no, they were third. Issues? Oh yes,
third. Okay.
Yeah, they were the third team because it started with like In the Senti, which was like a big get. And then it switched pretty quickly to someone else. And again, all over the place. It was a little bit schizophrenic as a book. But there were great issues, great moments. And more importantly, we now have like a whole universe over at Image because of this random pairing.
You get that. Then you get Old Man Logan, I think, right?
Which was a sublime run of Old Man.
And then
Logan.
You get Gideon Falls and the Bone Orchard mythos that they're working on. So they get all sorts of stuff from that. So yeah, anytime there's and we're talking specifically about an art team here and Antonia Fabela as a colorist and Lee Garbett as an artist. But again, you can throw Joe Henderson in there as a writer. Even though he's only written 3 comics, he's worked with these guys every single time, So when this guy said, when he dips his toe into comics, he's like, I know how to work with these people, and maybe I can work with other people. I don't know, but I'm not willing to risk it because I know what I'm getting out of these guys. I know how to work with them. I know what they do with my writing and what my writing does with their art. It's that sort of relationship, which is very, very cool. And I guess we can close out the creative team with Simon Bowland, the letterer. This guy who's, again, letters work all over. He has worked at Dynamite, at Rebellion, Dynamite, like doing a bunch of James Bond books. I've read all and that's the current, starting from like 2014, 2015, something like that, right? I think that's when those books started.
Yeah.
When Dynamite had them, there was the Warren Ellis. That was wrong. Because you were starting to read.
That was when I started. Like, I went into a comic shop.
Yeah.
My friend Drew sent me a picture of that first Varger cover of just like him with the trail of blood in the snow. Yeah. And I just held up my phone and I was like, how do I get this? And they were like, it's right over
Give me this one here. Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, fun fact, on issue 17 of New 52 Green Arrow, Jeff Lemire was the 6th writer to enter that character in that run. No. That's bonkers. That's tough. Legendary New 52 tomfoolery.
That's tough. Yeah. So Simon Bowland, letter on that, some other IP stuff like Battlestar Galactica and Red Sonja, Rebellion, which is 2000 AD, and Judge Dredd, obviously. He did scattered work at Marvel, real little stuff in like the late aughts, early 2010s. He did letter a book called The Marvels, which was this really weird mashup of eras. That was a pretty cool book. In like 2021, I think it was. Done mainly stuff over at DC. Like the Wildstorm, the Sandman universe books in 2018, which is kind of a revamp of all the Sandman books, Sandman, House of Magic, or House of Mystery, Book of Magic, things like that. A super awesome Lois Lane miniseries that Greg Rucka wrote with Mike Perkins on art. He did the lettering on that book. I don't know if you read the Gotham by Gaslight follow-up series they've done recently. One's called The Kryptonian Age, and then one is called A League for Justice. They're pretty fun. They expand the Gotham by Gaslight world.
I was extremely skeptical. I was like, I'll just read Gotham by Gaslight again. That's all I need.
If you take them at face value of just, if Batman exists in this world,
yeah,
and thus by extension, the assumption is that the other heroes exist in this world, what would that look like? And so that's what the exercise is. They're fun books. Simply, it's like just an expansion of the world. He learned those books. And also a book called The Batman, Bat Dash Man, book that Dan Jurgens did. I think they were called First Night, KNIGHT, and Second Night. It's about like early days, like long pointy-eared Batman, set like in the real world of like 1930s Hollywood and stuff like that, 40s Hollywood or whatever. Those are fun books as well. A couple other stuff, he lettered a great book at IDW called The Hunger in the Dusk, written by G. Willow Wilson and art by Chris Wildgoose. Super, super fun book. Over an Image, outside of Skyward and Skycraft and Shadecraft, the books that Joe Henderson and Lee Garbett have done. A book called Crosswind, Cry Havoc, which I think is a Cy Spurrier written book. And he's worked on Lazarus Written, which is a book by Greg Rucka and Michael Lark, which is one of my favorite comics kind of all time. So as a letter, Simon Bowland did a bunch of stuff, worked a bunch of things. But again, as a writer, he's done the lettering for all of Joe Henderson's books, all the stuff that he's written. Albeit not that many books, but still, when he writes something, he's got someone that's familiar with his style, his cadence, his use of, whether it's narration boxes or dialogue, things like that. Someone who's used to that and also used to the art style is going to get back, because he has done a lot of books that Lee Garbett has worked on as well. So when you have repeat people who have worked together, all that stuff, the factory line of pages as they move down to each person, when they're all familiar with each other, it makes the project smoother and easier. That you get a page, you get a script, you understand how it's going to be led on the page. That page goes to the colorist. They understand what's going to be happening there. Gets to the letterer, and they're familiar with everyone's work, so they know where the dialogue and the words are going to go, so it's not obstruct, but rather enhance the story itself. So anytime we got a team working together over multiple books on multiple publishers, even it's always a hopeful sign for me.
Yeah. I love to see it, and if this is any indication of, like, I've just read the first few issues here, but if it's any indication, I'm like, it'd be so easy to just tag Shadecraft in at the end of this, because we don't even need another Zero intro episode. We could just slide right over with the same creative team.
We could. So TBD. Maybe it's either 5 or 6 issues, but it is only 1 volume. It's a super fun book, and it weirdly is a similar style of setup. You have a young woman protagonist kind of dealing with larger things that are happening in the world. Shadecraft is a little more focused than the larger thing that we see in Skyward, but they're both really, really great books. And I remember when Shadecraft was announced, it was like, oh, a book from these guys that did Skyward. Like, I was so happy. And then a little bummed that it was only 1 arc, that was only, it wasn't like even like a 2-3 arc thing, like 12, 15, 18 issues, something like that. It was just the 1 arc. So little bummed out on that, because I want more from these guys. So again, when they announced the big burn over at Distillery, kind of one of the earlier books in the Distillery lineup, again, super stoked. Immediate subscribe for me. However long it runs, that book ran 3 issues. Of course, you get the end of that 3, and there's a possibility that they leave the door open for more. Same with Shadecraft. They leave the door open for more, and it's been a little while for Shadecraft, but if they ever went back to it, it'd be all over it.
Yeah. Anything else to say that people need to know? It's relatively easy to get a hold of and trade. It even has the handy $9.99 first trade feature.
It does, yes. The image $10. Yep.
Covering it all. I will say that, at least according to Comic Geeks, the first issue is $15. So good luck finding that.
Yeah. I think part of that too is just scarcity. I don't think it had a major.
But if there's, I'm sure at one point the IP was like optioned, which gave it some speculator hype or something like that.
I think it was too.
I mean, if you get 3 issues now, you get optioned. Like somebody
and also
I was talking to Kyle Starks, and he said every book he's ever written is optioned.
Yeah.
And no adaptations exist.
And of course, also when you have a writer who works in television, so you have someone who already has ties to the industry. Oh, this guy's written IP for another medium. Well, let's get that snapped up there. So I do think it was optioned. Back when it first came out, I'm sure there's probably like a Hollywood Reporter or a Variety archive post somewhere that says yes, this was, and then it never went anywhere. I have my issue, and I have it signed by Lee Garbett. Because I've seen him at a shows before, and he's really great. So yeah, this will be a fun one again. It has a light approach to some heavier, weighty topics, to some larger, there are larger themes and things that this book explores that maybe you wouldn't expect when you read the premise of like, oh, the world just has less gravity and things float around and you can kind of fly through the air and things like that. There are some larger societal things that I think people can look forward to that maybe they weren't expecting in a book like this, especially with kind of that synopsis there. So this is a fun one again. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I will see you all next week. Grab a copy, read along, first 5 issues. It's a nice, clean 555. I'm totally not going to get screwed up by that at all.
I'm sure you won't.
It'd be the first time in 50 seasons that I didn't screw up the issue count somehow. But
the math
anyway, thanks for listening, and we will see you next week for my low G life.
Peace.